Now, since I'm done with the ladders and the railing, I'm going to make this hood mount. And I started thinking about it, what's the best way to make this look good. I decided not to use angle iron, use square tubing. So here's my piece. It'll rest flush with the back of here. And then I've got these side pieces and I cut these angles. And I purposely cut them so that I can adjust them a little bit. There's a little bit of a gap. You can fill it in with a welder. And then we'll tack that on there. And then I made these little brackets. As you can tell, this will be bolted, or not bolted, but welded to the frame. And then your square tubing will be welded to that. So when you're removing the transmission or engine or whatever it might be, you can unbolt that bracket out of the way, everything come back up. When you want to put the engine back in, you can bolt that bracket on, the hood stays on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, to keep this hood centered, I'm going to find an angle iron, and I'll put an angle iron, cut this out, put an angle iron in here so it's cupped, and then I'll weld an angle iron to here. So when the hood comes down, it cradles on the two, and yeah, I think it'll work. Need to prep the surface a little bit, but I'll weld this angle on, weld this on, weld that on, make it happen. I like it. I think it's going to work out great. Don't need this thing. What do you guys think? It looks like a farmer built it. I love it. And it's slightly snowing outside. You guys want to see what's outside? Got a few inches, which is good. It's not near as cold as it was earlier. A little chilly still, but not too shabby. Cancer in a can. Yep, definitely tastes like cancer in a can. I think it's about time for me to start assembling the bearing assembly for the PTO drive shaft. So if that's the case, I need to put that gearbox back on. Yeah, I think that's probably what I'll do. Go ahead and start assembling and figuring out where I want to put that thing and get it one step closer. Now, one of the things I did is I took a flat piece of steel, punched 2 3/4 inch holes, made a dowel pin, pressed it in, and I'll weld it on the back. And you're probably thinking, why do I have a dowel pin in it? Well, it's like a centering pin. So you see how it slides in and out? I'm going to stick that on the back side and I'll weld it to the frame, and then when we take this off, instead of trying to line the holes up and everything, it's going to be a pain. I figured, why don't I just make a dowel pin? It'll just slide right in, and then we'll bolt here, here, and then down there as well. So that's plenty of bolts for this thing. So anyways, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead, put those on, take the glue gun, glue those on, bolt those tight, and then I'm gonna start figuring out my block here with universal joint ends and mount that on top. So at least that's the plan. Well, so far I like it. Got to weld, and forgot to weld that dowel pin in, but yeah, that'll work. I do like that. Looks good. What I'm doing right now is I got to build a plate for this bearing. I don't even know what to call this thing, to be honest. The unit that's going to hold the drive lines on the pivot point. So I need to make 4 holes for this to bolt to, and I'm going to use this plate, and I already marked off where I want to put the holes, so I put some punches in it, so I know exactly where those are going to go. This plate will be bolted here, and then this plate here will be bolted on the tractor. I'll make some ears for it to sit on, and then you can remove it if needed to, and so forth. So, take the punch, line them up, punch 4 holes. This machine is amazing. Absolutely incredible how that thing just literally punches through 1/2-inch steel. Ooh, I like that. They all look really centered to me. I like it. Okay, then I will figure out how I want to weld a plate to the tractor that this will bolt to. This is what I decided to do. I took some angle iron, 1.5 inch, and drilled it on, or drilled holes in it, bolted to the top flange. Top flange is 1/2 inch, so this spaces it up about 2 inches, okay? The reason why I need to space this up is I need to go over the pivot point of the tractor, and I need to not hit the grease zerk that's on that top pin, and I think with 2 inches of clearance, that should give me enough. So, what I planned on doing is welding this angle iron to the tractor, and then if I need to remove this, I just take these 4 bolts off, and then I can get those 4 bolts and go from there. Reason why I put this angle iron like this is that way I can put a wrench on this side and loosen it up, or if these get seized, I can cut them off easy. If I flip it around, it makes it look cleaner, but accessing those, I'm trying to think ahead in the future if I ever needed to. Hopefully I never have to. So what I'm gonna do here, this is the center of the tractor. I'm going exactly 12 inches from the center to the center of the universal joint, which will be a 1 foot, and that's the same that they have down below with the 2 drive lines. On the other side, where the other carry bearing for the other side will be exactly 1 foot, so the drive line will be 2 feet exactly. Now, as you can tell, I think I got it pretty squared up. It's square here and here, and it looks like it's almost perfect. I think it's ready to weld on. And then we should have plenty of clearance right above this right here. And I think it's gonna work out great. Sure hope I get everything figured out correctly. It looks like the yokes are identical to the pivot points down below. Probably should just weld it. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking a square, rotating this just a little bit, and I'll measure from this point to the back of the square, and there's 12 inches. And then I look at this point right here, and that is centered with yoke. Cool beans. Is that still a thing that we can say today? So this is a pillow block with a nice bearing in it, high speed bearing. I think that's what they said. It's rated for high speeds. And then this unit right here is what I need to make to fit on here. So I gotta cut down this yoke and make it, I gotta work my magic to fit it into this. That's all you gotta know. So something like that. And then this flange here will have a flange for a universal joint. You have your drive line with a slip yoke, and then here's that doohickey thing that I don't know what it's called, the bearing pillow block holder thing. It connects to that. And then on this side goes to a unit that just showed up, and I'll talk about it shortly. I'm really excited about it. This company is awesome to work with. I reached out to them and they hooked me up. And we have one light switch. And we have 2 light switch, 3, 4, 5. Oh, hang on a second. 6, 7, 8. We leave that one on. Today's the day that I'm going to start making drive shafts. Now, working with angles, and I mentioned earlier in one of the videos, and if you saw, working with round tubes isn't always the easiest because there's really not a square point to go from. So you kind of have to take a lot of different measurements, and there's tricks and things that you can use to make it easier. I learned the hard way, so most of the time I don't know those tricks, but I usually tend to get this right. If not, I can do it again to get it right. So what I'm going to do here is I have to have universal joint here, universal joint there, and I have to have a slip yoke. And for those that don't know what slip yokes are, let's go over here and show you. Here are the components that I need, along with a couple tubes over here, right here in these boxes. I know the shop is a mess. Right here is the tubes. So how this is gonna work is I've got a weld-on flange. This is a yoke flange, I think they call it. I apologize if I'm not correct in my terms. But this here will weld on one side of the pipe, and then you'll have a universal joint, and this will either be at the bottom or the top of the shaft. And then you've got this here, which is a slip yoke. And as you can tell, it's got splines, and they can go up and down. So if your distance changes, which it will, because your back end's gonna tilt, and this is gonna create either a long or shorter, I need a slip yoke. So I gotta weld those two together on a tube, and I gotta put the universal joint together, and I gotta get the right measurement to make sure that I have enough play to go back and forth. So I've got one driveline to make. I have two, which this is the center piece to go in between the tractor. And then I got another one here, which is gonna be going from the carrier bearing to my PTO, and also the unit that we will talk about shortly that is going to make this all happen. Now, for me to make this all happen, I have to machine this unit right here. It's got a big old threaded nut and splines. I got to machine that so it can fit on this high velocity bearing. From what I've found out is these universal joints, which this is called a 1550 is the term. I don't fully understand all the numbers, but that's the size of the drive shaft and a few other components. From my understanding, these universal joints can take, I thought it was up to 25 to 30 degrees. Granted, that's very excessive. You will tear up universal joints if you're running it really hard and long period of time. But the nice thing about us is I'm not too worried about tearing them up, because we're only gonna go on spurts, maybe 3 to 5 minutes at a time, and then it shuts down. Now, when you're doing this, there's a bar. When you're doing this, you gotta make sure that this yoke here, if this one's vertical like this, the top one has to be vertical. You cannot have it at an angle. If that top one's at an angle, and this one here is not at the same equal angle, you will cause vibrations, and you'll cause lots of problems. You don't want that. So these two are identical. I made sure that they're the same angle, and this is about, I figured, a little over 5 feet long. This is the longest one that I gotta do. Then you have a 2-foot section right here, and then you got your carrier bearing, and then you got the piece that goes to the front. It's gonna work, I know it. I have faith that it's gonna work. I have done so much research and lost so much sleep over this thing, so it has to work. All right, let's get started. I think the first thing that I'm gonna do is put a yoke together, bolt it up, put another yoke together, and then I'll measure the tube and then figure out exactly what length I need to cut that tube, and then we'll go from there. wrong way. I have to go this way. Okay, let's put the other one in. So now that I have the two yokes and the universal joints, I'm gonna put that slip yoke in. I'm gonna measure the distance of what it's gonna be. I'm gonna give it about probably a 1/4 inch of play. So I'm gonna max that slip yoke out, and then I'll take that measurement of what I want, and then I'll cut it down about a 1/4 inch. So that way it's not binding up here in case of some reason it needs to. I might even do a 1/2 inch, because I got quite a bit of travel. I think it's like 8 or 10 inches, no, 8 inches I think is what I have for travel. So that slip yoke can go in quite a bit. Now granted, when this tractor turns and tips, or when it goes through like a hole and this back half moves, what it's gonna do, it's gonna pull that drive shaft back with it like this, you see? So you gotta have enough where it can slip in and out on the top. So I'm gonna put the slip on the top so that way any water and residue hopefully will go out of the splines and not stay in the splines. If I have it on the bottom here, I feel like if water gets in there and it freezes, you might crack something. It's just not necessary, so I'll put it at the top. I don't really know if that's necessary, but it's my own personal preference. I'm just gonna do it. I love this bandsaw. Man, it's come in handy. I just love how slow it cuts, and I can watch and try to get it as precise as possible, and it's like a clean cut. It's pretty sweet. To be honest, I'm a little nervous. Will it all come together the way I'm thinking it will? I hope so. I sure hope so. That's what I wanted to see. So I just lightly heated it up, just to expand the tube. I tried to tap it in before, but that's not gonna happen. It's a little tight, which is good. I want it tight. So anyways, now that that's together, what I need to do is I need to make sure that it's true. And I think what I'll end up doing is putting in the lathe, chuck that end, and just hand turn it and see if it's got any wobble, and if it looks really good, which I think it's gonna be pretty darn close. I think I can just weld it up. And then granted, I have to do the same thing to the other side too. So I think what I'll do before I put it in the lathe, I think I'm gonna take this one off and put it on. Put it on it so I can make sure that they're both pretty true, and then we can weld it up. Well, put it on so that I can make sure the length is correct. That's what I really need to do. Boy, that's pretty. Now, one thing I need to make sure is, and I knew this when I was going to put this end on, I got to make sure that these universal joints are exactly lined up. I've got a lot of play to adjust with these teeth up here, so I can keep finding that one position where it's the closest. But at some point, I'm going to have to probably heat this up and maybe tap it and rotate it a little bit, just to make sure that they are perfectly square. All right, so this is what I planned on doing. You see the seam right here? There's a weld seam where they put that tube together, and I'm going to use that seam to find out the distance to the center of the yoke. Like that, you get it? And then I'm gonna come over here. I probably should have just lined that seam up when I put it on, but I was too hasty to put it on, so I have to do it the hard way, but I'm doing this. So that gives me the reference point of where I need to get the yokes lined up. So let's go put this thing on the tractor and see how the measurements turned out. And luckily for me, I've got a couple extra tubes. If I screw up on this one, I can always cut another tube. You really can't lengthen the tubes. That's not a good idea. So you got to cut it once, and hopefully you get it done the right way. A little challenging doing it by yourself. Yeah, there we go. Just take it off then. So here's what I'm talking about. If you look, see the center of this goes down right here, and it lines up to about right about there. So I need to move that mark to right there. And what I'll do is I'll have to heat that back up again, and then I'll have to rotate it. But what I'm going to do is make another mark, and then I'll just move the marks together. So, how's this look? Think that's gonna work? Sure hope so. And I got just enough room for those to not hit. And that's what I was worried about. I was pretty nervous that this is gonna be too sharp of an angle. And I'll tell you, it's sharper than I want it to be. But to make this happen, this is about the only way I can do it. The only other option is I'd have to find another type of gearbox to drop it down again to make it straighter. But we're gonna try this first, and if it doesn't work out and it doesn't do what we want, we can go to the next step and put a gearbox. But as of right now, I like that.